and welcome everyone to Dr. Spotfire sessions. I am D3.js. Learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. So our goal here is to be able to take all the questions that you have and provide you with solutions, steps, guidance, and resources to be able to solve them. In the crew, it's me, Divya Jyoti. I go by DJ. The data scientist. I work with TIBCO, and then we have Anna, the campaign coordinator. Today's featured speaker is Andrew Berridge, data scientist and solutions consultant with TIBCO, absolute whiz when it comes to Spotfire product integration and scripting. The core team is based out of Palo Alto, and we're going to jump into the session today that's going to be on JavaScript visualizations embedded within Spotfire, and it's spurred by your questions. So Andrew's going to take over now and get started.
Thank you very much, DJ. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. So we often get queries from our TIBCO community about how we can create JavaScript visualizations within TIBCO Spotfire and how we can extend some of the examples that come with JSViz. So JSViz is the JavaScript visualization extension, and it's available in Spotfire. It's available for free. So if there is a visualization that you'd like to do in Spotfire that's not available as default in Spotfire, then you can always just download and install this piece of software on your Spotfire server, and then it obviously you have to go to system administrator to do that. But once you've done that, you can then start to develop JavaScript visualizations within Spotfire. So here's the TIBCO community page you saw. I just Googled for it. JSViz is the name of the extension. This kind of gives you a screenshot of some of the kind of visualizations that you can produce with it. But the whole thing is that it's actually limitless as to what you can do with it. It's your imagination is the only limit. What we like to do is we like to respond to community questions. So I highlight this particular example when I'm going to reply to this after today's session. So the question is, how can I customize the JSViz samples? The question here is talking about an example of JSViz JavaScript visualizations that we supply with the JS visualization extension itself. It's a rotating world DXP. So what they want to do is show particular countries on the map and extend it to do that. So over the last couple of days, I've produced a sample, and I'm going to show you some of the things that I did in order to do that. And I'll use that example to answer this question and publish the example on here. So this was inspired by this Spotfire visualization. It uses D3.js to construct a rotating world. It's not showing anything analytic at the moment, but it's just to show you that you can, if you've got an idea or an example, an existing example, you can just go ahead and implement it in Spotfire. So if you don't know about D3.js, it's easily accessible here. It's a JavaScript visualization toolkit, if you will. So it's not a visualization library in that the visualizations are not pre-built. So you can't just say, oh, give me a bar chart or give me a line chart or give me one of these nice chord diagrams. What it is a framework that you can use to build interactive visualizations. And because it's a framework, you can actually extend any of the existing visualization examples that are given here to do what you want. So I'll just quickly click on here. Here's a gallery of some of the examples, and with each of the examples, it tells you how to actually build it, and it's got the source code in it. So here's an example of a particular visualization, and I just clicked on that one at random. Actually, that one hasn't got the code there. I picked the bad one. I can just click on any one of these examples, and it will usually have the D3 source code in it. So I want to show you how you can build one of these things from scratch. So what I did then, after looking at the rotating world, which was the original source of the question, I then found a D3 example of an Earth globe. We already built the rotating globe using D3, but this was seen to be perhaps a more complete or useful example, in that if you hover over the countries, it will highlight those countries. I can actually click and drag on the countries. Notice I can't click and drag on the sea, so I thought, well, it'd be a nice example of showing how I extended the existing example code to do that in Spotfire, because I thought that would be useful. It's also got the ability where you can click and drag click down and choose any one of these countries, and it will highlight that country and then rotate the map to show that country. So I took this example and built what the question asked for. At least I built an interpretation of what the question says. So if you look here, here's the actual source code that's necessary to build the D3 visualization. You've got some inclusion of scripts. So these scripts are the D3 source code itself. A couple of other things for, this is for topologies and doing some geo stuff with D3. And here's a D3Q, which is actually quite useful as well for working in D3 and JavaScript. Here are the styles for the different classes. So here's where you might modify the color of where you've got the highlights. So you could change focused fill. That's the light green that you see there. So if you wanted to change the color, you just change that. And then we go into the script itself, which sets up the projection and the globe, appends it to an SVG div within the HTML page, and then does all the other things with mouse interactions, with focusing, with rotating the globe when you click on it, and all that sort of stuff like that. So how do we go about embedding an example of this type in Spotfire? It was my original intention to go through an example from scratch, but if I did that, we would be here forever. So what I want to show you is the basic steps, and then I already did it kind of examples. So let me just show you what we're actually aiming for, and the final example, and then I'll show you how I built that. So I transition across to Spotfire. You can see we've got this globe that you saw on a D3 example earlier. So just like on the web page that I showed you earlier, I can click on a country and drag the globe around to view a particular portion. If I click and pull down one of these options here, it will highlight that country and move the map to show it. Choose a bigger country like China. And you can see the map zooms in and moves around automatically. What I also did was enable some bidirectional interactivity from Spotfire. So Spotfire, as you know, has the ability to mark data in any other Spotfire visualization. So if I were to click and drag over these countries here, you'll see it's highlighted them on the map. So now these are the countries that I've actually selected within my Spotfire analysis. And you could imagine that these might, there might also be some data associated with this, which we could also display on the map. But this is just to show the bidirectional interactivity from this. The other thing that we also like to do from time to time is to enable marking within Spotfire. So just to show you that this works, what I've actually got is a details visualization over here. So if I were to mark data here, you can see it's pulling it up here. I can also do that by interacting with the map. So if I click on a country in the map, I'm actually holding down the control key right now. So that's the way I produce the interactivity here. So if I click on any one of the, oops, something strange happened there. If I click on any one of these countries, it builds up the marking map here. Let me just refresh that and go back to a fresh page. With anything, there's a couple of little niggles to iron out. But now you can see I'm actually marking the countries on the globe within the JavaScript visualization, and that's marking the data in Spotfire. So you'll see this details visualization responding as to when I click on the on the globe. You don't get this marking functionality for free. You do actually have to implement it inside the JavaScript. So I can talk about how that's done too. So let me go into how this kind of visualization was built. Actually, setting up the default visualization itself was quite straightforward, and most of the code I was able to copy and paste from the D3 page, and it just kind of worked. But there were a couple of things I did have to do to handle things like resizing the visualization, making sure it gets redrawn, actually passing the data in to show which countries are going to be highlighted. So if you're not already familiar with the Spotfire JSViz paradigm, what you can do, let me just open a quick example here. I just need a Spotfire file to work on. When the JSViz extension is installed on your server and then downloaded to your Spotfire client, what you get is this new JavaScript. Let me just switch to light. You get this new JavaScript visualization button. So if I click this here, it'll actually create an empty JavaScript visualization container. So this doesn't do anything by default. So what we have to do then is start to fill it in with data, and also with the JavaScript source code, and set it all up that way. Now what I need is a list of the countries. I know there's already one in here, but it doesn't exactly match, so I'm going to load a fresh data set. Let me do that from here. So here's the list of countries that is already used in the D3 example on the web, just to show you that. So this is the list of countries and their IDs. So we can use that to control the marking, because the country IDs are the same here. So now once I create this JavaScript visualization, I need the way to pass the data into it. So if I click here and add a new data configuration, I can choose the country names. I'll just give this a sensible name. And then I can define the columns that go into the data. The group by column is the column that is used for aggregating the data. So we have one country, and that's the unique key. So we can use either the ID or the name. So I think I'll just bring the ID into here. But we need to bring the country IDs and also the names into the JavaScript visualization. So I'll put both of these in here, and I'll just do, I can change the aggregation method here as well. So maybe first there as well. So now that's saved. What this does is generate some JSON, which is JavaScript object notation, and I can copy that to the clipboard and just run Notepad. I'll show you what that looks like. This is the actual data that will be sent into the Spotfire visualization. This contains all sorts of things about whether the data is marked or as well as the actual data itself. So you'll see the JSON data structure. You can see each of the countries and their IDs in this JSON here. The next step is to set up the library of JavaScript visualization code. So in the example on the D3 website, you can see it loads D3 version 3, so I can actually just copy that that link here for the script, and I can add it as a linked content here, so just paste that in. I sometimes just do this as well so you can see what it's doing, give it a sensible name. So that's D3. It might use jQuery, which is really useful. Really useful JavaScript framework as well, handling HTML pages and that kind of stuff. Here's the top of JSON, so I can include that as well. And then I start to build the actual code I need. There's when you get the JSViz package from us, you do also get a couple of boilerplate pieces of JavaScript code that that help with interacting with JavaScript visualizations inside of Spotfire. So if I swap over to my pre-built example here, you'll see that we've got all these linked files up here. So those will be fetched from the internet. And we've also got these embedded files here. So these embedded files are the code for our actual solution here that we're going to implement, and they are embedded within the Spotfire file, and so they can the Spotfire file becomes transportable. It can be used anywhere without saving the files separately, and all sorts of other challenges with that. So as I mentioned, there's some boilerplate code, so that's called JSViz.js. That just makes things easier when working with this JSViz. We've got styles, which I based on the styles that were on the D3 example online, so I just pasted those in here. Actually, I saved them as a file and loaded them up. What you have to do is you have to press to add a new embedded content item. You have to click and you have to find a file to upload in the first instance, styles.css. So here's where you load a styles CSS, for example, and then that becomes a new embedded an embedded item. So now you can see I've added that embedded content here. And rotating world.js is the implementation that actually generates the JavaScript visualization. I'm going to go into that in a bit more detail in a minute, but if we transition across to the contents property page, that's where we decide which files are going to be used in our solution, and also the order in which they appear in our solution. Sometimes JavaScript ordering matters, other times it doesn't, but it's comforting to be able to set the order in which those scripts are included. So the basic paradigm is to move. If I move some of these things out, they'll stop working. So the basic paradigm is to move all these files across that become part of the solution into the used content. So those then provide the JavaScript source that is used by the actual visualization itself. Just take a quick pause there. Before I delve into the JavaScript code itself. So now I'm editing the rotating world JS itself. So if I kind of show you how this looks, the main function that you have to implement as part of a JavaScript visualization is this render core. Now what happens is that every time Spotfire receives new data, or the marking changes, or you change the filtering, or do anything like that inside Spotfire, this render core function will be called with SF data, which is the JSON code that I showed you before in Notepad. So it sends this JSON code in. The JSON also contains metadata about the columns that are coming into the visualization. So the number of rows, page, whether the the data is paged. You don't have to worry about that if you're working with small amounts of data. All sorts of things like that. Then you actually get the data here. It's a very flat structure with each row is an item, and the order of those items corresponds to the order of the columns in the metadata. So first ID in this example is 4, and first name in this case is Afghanistan. And then at the end of this JSON, there's also some other metadata. You can have you can pass multiple tables into the extension. There's the current user and all this kind of stuff. I'm actually not sure what static means, but I think it's new functionality that's just been released. So there's all these things that you can also understand. You can also pass in the current style settings for the current theme that you've used in Spotfire. So you can use this style setting to also style your JavaScript visualization, because it's just an HTML implementation of the styles that you used in Spotfire, which, because Spotfire is web-based, those styles work inside Spotfire as well as in the JavaScript visualization itself. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about how this all works, and also I can give some useful tips about how to work with D3, because to the uninitiated, D3 may seem a little strange, and to those that haven't done any work with asynchronous JavaScript, it may also look strange. So let me just talk a little bit about how the globe is built and how that works. So I've got a couple of global variables where we store things like the world data and the country names. If we go back to the existing example, you'll see that these are relative links because they're relative to this hosted file here. So we need to be able to put absolute links into those. So I found those files on GitHub, the actual links to those files on GitHub, and swap those out in the source code here. So you'll see that here. And basically this will load those files in, and when they're loaded, this is asynchronous. So when they're loaded, this D3Q functionality will call this setup globe function and pass in the world data. Oops, cancel that, go back in. The world data and also the country lists as well. So that's what gets passed in here. And here's where I set up the global variables with that, so they're always available, and that we don't need to reload these files every time the visualization data changes. A few things, I'm not going to go through all this in detail because it'll take us way too long, but basically just things setting up the window width and height. Those are all done also in the, so we've got these done here in the existing example, and the code basically follows this example. I just pasted everything in and then just tweaked it to get it working. So we've got the setup of the projection for the sphere, setting up the water, which is the blue stuff on the globe. And here's some additional functionality I added, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Then we set up the countries and all the features. And again, this is just me copying and pasting in the JavaScript code on the D3 example. Same here, just exactly the same. Same here. Well, I added this mouse event here, which I'll talk about in a minute. Mouse over is the same, so as I hover over, I get the tooltips, and it selects the country. And this bit here does the drop-down list, so it moves the globe around and selects a country, and that's what this globe rotating does here. And actually there's a bit on drag. So where was the on drag? Oh yes, here it is. So here's how D3 implements the drag functionality. It's actually really nice, the D3 functionality, the whole click and drag behavior and the translation of the and rotation as the projection on the globe is all handled by just that code. And the nice thing is that we don't have to write that code because it's already available in that example. So it's basically just copying and pasting it in. Very simple. Okay. And this is rotating when we select a country. So this is the bit that handles when I click, when I change the drop down here. So just transitions smoothly. D3 is great with transitions. It automatically transitions one shape to another, or translates, transitions one thing to another with a nice interpolate function. So it does that all kind of smoothly without you having to worry about it. And here's just a lookup function. And sorry, here's a little lookup function that just returns the country name based on what's been selected, or the ID of the country. I can't quite remember at this stage. I think it just returns the name of the country. Okay, so a little bit about D3. So it's all asynchronous and function based. So an example of that is whether we should. So if you remember, when I clicked. Let me just go back and demonstrate. So if I mark something here, it highlights these countries. It's quite interesting to understand actually what's going on behind the scenes. Though it doesn't change the object that's being shown as such. Each one of these objects is actually an SVG. It's a scalable vector graphic inside the browser. So what's happening when we select an item is we're changing the CSS class of that item on the fly to make it appear like it's selected. So all we're doing when we mark these in Spotfire is we are affecting the CSS class. Now to show how that works, it's just one or two lines of code. It's basically just this. So what this does is select all the all the SVG elements in the globe, and sets the CSS class of all the SVG objects. But what happens is there will be a function that iterates over all the SVG objects, and this function is here. So basically what that is, marked countries, is a list of the countries that are marked inside Spotfire. So this function will iterate over each of the SVG objects and return a value, true or false, to whether the marked class, CSS class, should be set. That's very different from writing some kind of iterative code that's going to run over it, because you don't want to have to bother with the iterating over, and don't want to have to write procedural code. It's a lot longer and more clumsy, but it just takes a mind switch to think about how this actually works. So this is the SVG object itself that's being passed in, and here's the iterator variable, which we don't actually use in this function. But here's the simple little function that runs as it iterates over the SVG elements in the visualization. They're very nice and simple. It's when you get your head around what's actually going on there. There's a few other things to talk about. Obviously, I had to write some code that builds the list of indices for the countries that are marked. So we've got the IDs for those countries, so this function will return the correct value for the marked class. The marked class is just, I've just given it the color red, so it's very easy to see. So, and that's done by iterating over the data that's being passed into the visualization. So there's a very simple loop here, which iterates over the data, and it's saying if chart data, the particular object hints marked. So if we go back to here, there's the hints. That's how it comes across in the JSON. So if this row were marked, it would say marked is true there. So you could see that that's how the JSON would be passed across to the visualization. So basically, marked countries becomes an array of IDs for the marked items in Spotfire. So this is how we're passing marked IDs into the JavaScript visualization. So marked countries contains a list of countries that are marked in Spotfire, and here again is this function that iterates over all the SVG objects and decides whether to apply the marked class to each of the SVG objects in the visualization. Now, finally, I want to show how we mark within Spotfire, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how to debug within Spotfire, because writing code without being able to debug is a severe challenge. But we can with Spotfire. It's actually really quite easy. So I added an on-click event here. So this basically just on every adds an on-click event to every land. So land is countries. With those are the SVG objects that are countries, and it looks to see if the control key is pressed. And if the control key is pressed and we don't already have that ID in our list of countries that we're going to mark, we just add it to that array. Otherwise, it's removed from the array. So that gives if you click on a country once to mark it, then you can click on it again to unmark. You'll notice this here, console.log. That's really useful. I'll show why in a minute. Then every time the user does a mark operation inside the visualization, there's a simple Spotfire function here, which we can call, which is already included with the JSViz, which marks the indices of the rows that we mark on the map. So that's how the marking is fed from the map back into Spotfire. There's just one thing to show before I move away from the code itself, and that is, of course, the standard Spotfire functionality is that if I were clicking without using any control keys or anything like that, then I would actually be doing a mark operation. But because we want to navigate around the map like this, I had to disable the standard Spotfire marking functionality. So remember I discussed the JSViz helper functions. There is actually some function in here which enables the drawing of a rectangle for marking with Spotfire. So I just disabled that. So here's this init marking. I just made that return straight away. In fact, I can show you the effect of re-enabling that. Let me just cut and paste this so I can put it back in really easily. Now, what would happen is, as I click and drag on the map, I'm drawing a rectangle at the same time, which probably isn't really what you want. And I decided that drawing a rectangle on the map for marking isn't actually very useful because it's a sphere, and marking a rectangle on a sphere doesn't really work. So that's why I moved to the control-click paradigm. That makes it much more useful. So I can just go back in here and disable this init marking, and now that annoying rectangle's gone away. The other thing I didn't mention is the click and drag functionality over water. So let me just discuss that really briefly, and then I'll talk about debugging. All I did was take the existing code for clicking and dragging on countries. So if you remember, if we go back to the original D3 example, and this is what I mean about D3 being so extensible. If it doesn't do something that you want it to do, then you can always code it to make it do just that. So now if I go back on here and I'm clicking on the water, nothing's happening. It's only if I click on a country that I can grab the globe. So if I go back to the Spotfire example, I took the code for dragging the land mass objects and re-implemented it, basically copied and pasted it, all the bits that made sense anyway, to this water, the water object. So they can also be clicked and dragged upon. So I found that that was pretty easy to do. Just copy and pasting the code. Right, debug. So in Spotfire, this is a really, really useful technique for all sorts of things. There is this development menu. However, it's not enabled by default, so you have to remember to go into this options menu here and check this option that's right down the bottom that you won't know it's there unless you should one day accidentally scroll to the bottom of this here. So this is a really useful tip to remember. Show development menu. So once I've enabled this development menu, I've then got a couple of really useful tools like reloading, which is useful when you're doing debugging and things like that. I can reload the browser and that will reload my page. I can copy the URL to the clipboard, which is actually interesting because I can actually use Spotfire inside the web browser, even though it's running in the client. I'll show you that in a minute. But the most helpful is this Chrome developer tools. Spotfire is running Chrome under the hood. So you get all the benefits of this fully featured Chrome debugger. So I can do things like hover over elements and it will open the exact part of the HTML page. So here's me hovering over each of the SVG objects in the globe. So path.land, path.land, path.water. So you can see how I am hovering over each of these SVG elements. So it's really useful for debugging how things are working. It's also possible to use the console. So remember I did a few console.log statements. So if I just click off this momentarily and interact with the visualization, we should be able to see some things changing. So if I did this, we can see the debug console spitting out some IDs and other debug information, which is it's really helpful as you start to debug or do any kind of code beyond the very simple. It's also possible to insert debug statements. So I'm just browsing through to the I'm just browsing through to the source that I wrote. So here's the JavaScript that I just showed you minutes ago. It's possible to put debug statements in here, and if I then, breakpoints in here. So then if I were to reload the browser and cross my fingers, always get the demo effect. Now Chrome has paused in the debugger, and I can step through the code I can look at the objects by hovering over them. I can drill into their details. I can do lots more things, almost as if I was using a proper IDE for developing this JavaScript. So this kind of thing really, really speeds up your JavaScript development. It's worth noting that if you make a mistake and write some code that doesn't check out properly syntactically, you do get notifications down here. So you get problems like this. So I just haven't specified something properly. You also get, it's useful to have that open at the same time as you've got the console open here as well, because if you make a mistake, like referring to something that's undefined or doing something like that, you do get more details of the error here down in the console. Finally, just by way of completeness of this development menu, it's also possible to copy that URL to the clipboard. And if I paste this into Chrome, you can now see Spotfire running inside a native Chrome browser, but it's being served by the analyst client, and it all just works as if you're doing that. But that can be useful if you want to run the Chrome developer tools outside of the browser, or you have a browser-specific thing you want to look at. But then if I go back to Spotfire, interesting. In some cases, Spotfire then doesn't work properly until you reload the browser here, for maybe obvious reasons. So I think that concludes my demo of this particular complete walk through the building of this rotating world JavaScript example. As I said, we'll be posting this and with some hints and tips and some documentation about how this kind of thing works after the session.
That sounds great, Andrew. For everyone, if you want, you can trace back to the original question on community answers, but there should also be a wiki page that will get put up in about a week or two that you should be able to follow on community wiki. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was absolutely brilliant. And now we're going to switch into question and answer mode for this week. Thanks. Okay, so today we might not be able to go through all the questions, but I just thought the rotating world problem was so interesting and significant, and we see more and more applications of orthographic projections, so we kind of just prioritize that. Now moving into the Q&A mode, the first thing that I want to highlight is you can get your questions answered by tweeting at us, but the best way is to go to TIBCO Community Answers section with the hashtag Dr. Spotfire. You can put this hashtag in the title or in the actual tag, doesn't matter. Or you can send us an email with your question on drspotfire@tibco.com. The only thing that we request for the email is that the email is not to replace the community. When you ask a question on community, it benefits all the users. So email should be used if you have sensitive data that you don't want to share over the community. And there's always support@tibco.com for our existing customers to help as well. Moving to the first question. This is about a KPI chart. The question basically says that they have multiple KPIs. They have created several KPIs from multiple tables, but one of them is an aggregate KPI. So you can see this is the image that was attached. And now, since there is no tile by, there is no title. So how do you go about creating a title for such a KPI? For those of you who are on Spotfire older versions than 7.6, KPI chart was introduced in 7.6 and has a number of really good features like sorting and being able to get metrics from different tables together, different data sets together. So definitely check it out. Now I'm going to go in and show you what exactly it's meant by having a title. So if I go to the values and create a tile by, so let me do a tile by gender, you can immediately see that I get, an annotation on top that shows what it is. Whereas if I remove it, this is what I have. It's just the sum. So a good way to label something like this, it's not an exact title, but it's a really good workaround, is to right click and say custom expression. And in your custom expression, you can give it a display name. So if I give it the display name of electronic sales, you'll see that you have a sensible title show up immediately. You will have to do this change for every individual KPI. If I had multiple KPIs here, you would have to go in and configure for all of them. But as you can see, I just created a duplicate, so it automatically transferred all the settings. Duplicate visualization and duplicate settings are very useful shortcuts that you should keep reusing, as that saves you from having to recreate a lot of the content. I'm going to show how this works for other visualizations as well. So I'm going to change visualization to bar chart, and I'm going to change this so that it gets refreshed. So now you can see that I got the sum furniture again. So instead of going into the custom function, I can directly use my aggregation menu and use the keyword as and give it a display name. So it says sum furniture as furniture sales. And as you press enter, it shows up on your display title. Just to go in and look at this custom expression, you can see that it automatically configures your display name. Now you can look at the as keyword over here, and this shows you basically how to use it in different examples, what it is. So this search tool is quite handy for looking up any functions that TIBCO Spotfire provides. The next question is a bit brief as well. So we had shown the Spotfire tips and tricks create our graphs within a visualization. So if I refresh our memory a little bit, this is what the DXP was like, where we show you how to use graphics, open source R packages, and get them to show up in Spotfire. So we started with a pure visualization example. Then we moved to one in which you could actually set up your interactivity with Spotfire. So for example, I'm changing the number of spokes using Spotfire, and I can even change, this uses the color brewer palette. I can even change the palette that I have. So I can take, let's see, I can take red, orange. I have to take a valid palette. Oops, no palette detected. So let's take set 2. Yeah, and you can see that all the colors of that have the different tones, and I can set up how many I want. I can extract the number, the actual color codes. And then finally, we finished on creating a visualization with 2 different models grouped by a column plot on the same visualization. So this actually takes all of your Spotfire tear capability and just joins it with some of the nice features that we have in open source R graphics packages. So this is the citation from where I got this example code, but as you can see, I modified it a little bit to custom fit to Spotfire functionality. This is the tutorial detailing the steps of everything that you need to do, and I've uploaded the DXP on this page. So Anna can send you a link to this page, and you should be able to try it out and leave your comments about what you find, how you're using this functionality, and how you're able to customize the DXP. That was our second email data request. The third one is actually a new feature, is not a new feature in Spotfire that even I wasn't aware of. So I thought it would be really nice to share it with everyone. This is a layout question. So say, for example, we have the filter panel to the left, and we have the data panel. We have the filter panel to the right, and the data panel also over here. It should actually be this side. So let's begin with the initial configuration. And now the user wants to know how do they actually move these things to fit where they want them to fit on the page, because they don't really like this left-right divide. The other thing is I encourage everybody to get familiar with just the menu bar options, because it's so much easier than using a view or an insert or something like that. It's just really quick, and if you get used to it, things move very conveniently. So the question is it possible to bring the filter pane to the left instead of the right? And the answer is that you just drag it and it will snap. It will snap to all the different edges that you have, to the left, bottom, right, etc. And you can do it with this, with details on demand, with the data panel. What you can also do is you can unpin any of them. So especially for the filter panel, if you have a visualization that is controlled by certain filters, you can quite easily just set up your filter to show that view and just keep it hovering over the visualization. You can change the colors and some of the fonts, etc. of this actual pane by going through the custom themes and just editing the visualization general and the visualization area part of the custom theme. On community.tipco.com, if you search for visual best practices, you will get more details about how to use custom themes and custom visualizations. So this was a really simple question that I found super useful, so just sharing it for everyone. The next question that we have, and this is going to be the last question of the day. The other two we'll pick up in the next session. The answers to the next two questions are already posted on community. So if these are questions that you were interested in, you should be able to just follow the direction from community. So moving to this question, this basically said that the user wants to toggle between two maps, and they want to know what's the best way to do it. The best way to do it is create a layout bookmark. So I'm going to show you how it works before I explain how to create it. You can see that this is the first visualization in which I simply have my 4 cities marked. But in my second visualization, I have some adornment. So I have a size by, I have a color by, and I want to see how exactly can I toggle between them. So I created a bookmark, and this is the bookmark page, and I can just click on it. And if I type a bookmark name, I should be able to just create a new bookmark, and we'll look at that in a minute. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. So if I go in and say new bookmark, map, view, both, and if I click on plus, now I have the map chart view bookmark. And these are the options that you have. So I can apply it special using only one element of the bookmark. The bookmark itself stores all of these different things. I can rename, copy bookmark URL. This right now is disabled because this is mostly for web player. And then this can be a private bookmark or a public bookmark, depending on if you upload it to your library, what users see it. And then you can update it, and then you can delete it. So using that, what I did was I just changed the page layout, and I created the bookmark, and I inserted it as a property. And you can see that now this is basically giving the illusion of toggling without actually creating the computational load of toggling. So to show you how to insert one of these things, I'm going to go in and say insert action control. I can have a button or a link or an image. I'll use a link. Display text would be both maps. And I'll go into bookmark, choose the both map view that we just created, and have only add the layout. I could use all of these, but I'm not doing anything with the filtering or the marking, so I just need the map view. So now if I save it, if I click on it, you see that the page updates it. Now let's say I have a bookmark and I've changed something. So from minimum, I want it to be a yellow and I want my maximum to be like a bright green. Or let's take a sharper color. Let's go from a red to a green. So now if I've done that, I have the option to go into my bookmarks panel. And this was my adornments bookmark. And I can just click on it and say update. So now if I go in and do the same thing, that if I insert action control with link saying adornment and choose the adornments bookmark, you will see that if I do both maps, I get it without adornment, but if I use this one, it shows me the updated view. And if I change the layout of the page, so if I maximize this, go into this again and update my adornments bookmark. So this is both maps, this is adornment, and this is base map view. So this is how you would toggle between visualizations in Spotfire. It works for all visualizations and not just bookmarks. So these are all the questions that we had time for this session. We'll come back next session with date time and multiple column transformation questions. Thank you for joining and hope to see you next session.